My first recollection of when I began to think about what it means to be healthy was when I was 12. Pretty heavy stuff. My father died when I was 8, and that took the wind out of my sails for quite a while. That triggered off a barrage of fear and emotion and isolation and abandonment and sadness that I'm sure affected every function in my body and took me till I was about 12 to start coming out of. I was reading bodybuilding magazines, and I enjoyed the beauty of bodybuilders and the strength and the muscle, and being a young guy working on a farm, and I was never that big of a kid. I was small. I didn't grow real fast. I wanted to be stronger because I loved to compete athletically, and started wrestling in the first grade and was into every sport that I could play. But once I started reading bodybuilding magazines, and back then, bodybuilding wasn't like it is today with all the drugs and kind of craziness. It was really about being healthy. So I was reading people like Bill Pearl, Frank Zane, Arnold, Franco Columbu. I began looking at these concepts and looking around me and looking for ways that I could make myself healthier. I think that set the tone for the rest of my life. I've been lifting weights continuously since I was 12, and I'm 58. So something deep inside of me had this real interest in what it means to be healthy, because in my mind as a competitive athlete, I could see the direct connection between how healthy a person was and how strong and how fit, how flexible, and how durable they were. So it really began when I was 12. I remember one time when I was a young boy, my mother just started crying, and I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "It never ceases to amaze me how much you are so much like your father." But my stepfather, he taught me a lot of basic skills, but what he taught me the most was discipline. And he was a brutal taskmaster. He did not accept excuses. If you weren't bleeding badly or very sick, there was no sense even mentioning to him. If you had a blister, he didn't care. He wanted you to get 5 more. Keep the shovel going, keep the axe going, keep the hammer going. Don't complain. He taught me to think on the job. He taught me to be very practical. He taught me not to make excuses. He taught me how to be tough. He taught me how to get a job done. He taught me to use the resources you had available or in the environment. And if you didn't have what you need, invent it.
Nobody's going to fix this industry until we do it.
I wouldn't wish this kind of education on anybody. It can be done much more lovingly, but in hindsight, my father gave me exactly the toughness I needed to pioneer what I pioneered. I could face the dragon and know that you got to keep on your feet and keep thinking, or you could get badly hurt, which helped me tremendously as an athlete, especially as a martial artist and a boxer. When I got on the Army boxing team as a fighter, I also represented the Army in triathlon. what happened is there was an immediate level of respect because the fighters are like, how in the world can this guy train for triathlon and do what we're doing, because this is enough to just fry us every day. My company commander said, I'm betting a lot of money on you to win the Army triathlon, so he says, if you want to stop boxing and train full time, I'll let you do that. And so when I went back to the boxing gym and said to the coaches I was going to leave to train full time for triathlon, they said, oh God, don't do that. We'll let you be the trainer and you can take over training for the athletes. So that opened the door for me to become the trainer of the Army boxing team, where I got to share my philosophies of training, of eating. I implemented the first massage therapy program for the athletes. That's when it really crystallized for me, and I realized at a deep level that my path was to share health and fitness.
When I called you the godfather of wellness.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I said, this guy's been doing stuff with wellness that we're hearing about now for a very, very long time. A lot of these things that we think are new, he's been talking about.
To master exercise, you have to master the concept of understanding how stress works, don't you?
100%.
Isn't the science of exercise is the scientific application of different types of stress?
100%.
Right.
So if you don't know what else plays into the total equation called stress in the body, how do you ever know how much is a therapeutic dose of exercise for any problem? You don't. You're guessing.
For the International Boxing Federation World Heavyweight Championship, introducing in the blue corner, James Bone Crusher Smith.
You could say my clinical work began in the Army when James Bone Crusher Smith came to my house. One day, James Bone Crusher Smith's trainer, Emil Griffith, who's world famous for his training of elite boxers, asked me if I would work on James Bone Crusher Smith. And I said, not for free. He's big, and I already take care of a whole team of boxers. Oh, he said, oh, he'll be happy to pay you. James is probably the most responsible, actually, for me being the person I am today, because I had no idea that you could make a good living doing sports massage therapy. But after I worked on him, he rolls over and he looks at me and says, how much do I owe you? And I smiled and said, well, I don't know. I've never charged anybody for a massage before. I said, is $25 okay? And I'd worked on it for like 2.5 hours, and he cracked up laughing. And I was kind of scared, I'm like, and I looked at him, I said, did I do a bad job? And he said, Paul, you just gave me the best massage I've ever had in my life. He had just come back from fighting Larry Holmes in Las Vegas. He said, Paul, I was paying $100 an hour for massage therapists that weren't near as good as you. And my eyes got big as golf balls, and I said, people make $100 an hour doing this? And instantly I said, as soon as I get out of the Army, I'm starting a sports massage therapy clinic. And that's what happened. It was the first time in my life that all the sort of ducks came into line, and I could see that everything I'd learned was helping me do this. I got sort of a jack of all trades internship right on the farm. I learned how to weld. I went to trade school to be in for automotive and industrial repair when I was 18. I learned everything you need to learn about engines and brake systems and hydraulics and electronics to be an effective mechanic. I was an apprentice bricklayer for probably 2/3 of a year, where I learned a lot about brick masonry and stonework. I worked in a mechanic shop when I was a kid to make extra money. I worked in a butcher shop skinning deer, moose, elk. I worked on a fishing boat. I worked in logging camps. I worked in the military as a aircraft weapon systems repairman and also a paratrooper. I trained the Army boxing team. I worked for an exploration and water well drilling company for a year. I worked as a machinist for Napa Auto Parts. I worked as a marine mechanic. I took training for home electronics when I was leaving the military. They had an exit program. all these different ways of relating to the world and these different ways of getting things done, and seeing how elements work together and how systems work together made it much easier for me to understand anatomy and physiology. And because I had these kind of basic levels of training in all these different systems, I could explain complicated things from the basics up. For example, I would tell people, if an engine breaks down, the first thing you got to do is identify whether you have ignition, fuel, and compression. It doesn't matter what you do if you don't check those three things. And paradoxically, a lot of people that call themselves mechanics overlook 1, 2, or 3 of those and start replacing parts. When I look at the human body and said, okay, I've got to identify what the absolute essentials are, because if you miss any one of those, you're probably not going to get to the source of the problem. So they turned out to be nutrition, hydration, sleep, breathing, thinking, and movement. So whenever I analyze what's going on with a person, I'm always looking through the eyes of those 6 foundation principles, because any discrepancy in any one of them can cause knock-on deficiencies in any of the other ones. See, I started in my profession in January 1984. My only vision was to share my teachings as widely as possible and get as many people awake to how we could do a better job, and to help them understand the integration of the body, the mind, the emotions, the viscera, the glands, the organs, the musculoskeletal system. I mean, you know, you got to realize when I started this, doctors and the best doctors and therapists in the world could not believe it when I told them someone's back pain was coming from adrenal exhaustion, or from kidneys being clogged up, or from liver challenges. They looked at me like I was crazy. And I'm studying their own books. So they had so compartmentalized the body. I mean, we even have infighting between doctors and therapists about who should touch what, and, oh, you can't touch the spine, you're not qualified. You know, it's like they'd broken the body up into territories and they would fight over it. So when a guy like me came along and started saying, wait a minute, you can't even do rehab with that mindset, because that's not how the body works. The saving grace is that I didn't have a college degree. And I was licensed as a holistic health practitioner, which gives me a license by law to use any holistic approach to helping people with any kind of problem. So they did not know how to hate me. Because I had these kinds of big successes with major organizations like the Chicago Bulls and people like that, well, once the word got out, the word was out. When you help make great athletes greater, and you help people get over injuries, and you help people feel better, there's a deep sense of meaning, and you find your place in the world.
No American-born player has scored more goals or compiled more points than Mike Modano.
And so much spirit moved through me in those experiences that I felt totally alive. And I would dream about ways to do things better. I would meditate on ways to do things better. I would practice things. I would be so passionate that I could probably heal people with passion alone. I was very busy. I was studying 24 hours a day. I was learning with every client. I was interacting with doctors and therapists of a wide variety of types. I was traveling all over the United States and other countries, taking courses from the best doctors and therapists in the world on the subjects that I felt I needed more knowledge on. I was truly free. I was my own man. I was my own boss. I had everything I needed, and I was making enough money to afford good education and all the books I wanted, and I felt the happiest and the freest I'd ever been to that point in my life. And not only did I take my athletic mindset of doing the best I could do in sports with me, but I took the mindset, I'm going to do the very best I can do to grow myself professionally. And I'm going to see how good at this I can get, how much I can learn, how far I can take it in the world. Charles Poliquin had a huge number of athletes seeing him and working with him, and he had to hire multiple strength coaches, which he would train in his approach. And he sent his 2 top guys to see me specifically to learn my approach to core assessment and core control. Both of those guys said, what you're teaching is so far beyond anything out there, you really ought to consider opening your own school. And Charles Poliquin told me one day, he said, if you didn't study anything or change anything, 10 years from now, you will still be way ahead. He said, if you didn't do anything for 10 years, you'll still be on the cutting edge. I just sort of like the penny dropped inside of me, and I said, yes, that's what I've got to do. I've got to teach this on a global scale. And like I said, I'd already had a lot of experience teaching physical therapists, osteopaths, and chiropractors, and they were all blown away by it. So there was no inhibition about whether I could do it or whether I had the knowledge or the skill. It was just a transition from spending all those years in clinics, working sort of in the professional medical community, to shifting to an educational institution. So by the time I opened the CHEK Institute, which was '95, I had started teaching professionally, running seminars and workshops since 1988.
There's so much confusion in the health and exercise world about what I do. You wouldn't believe all the funny stories I hear about what Paul Chek does. Oh, he's the Swiss ball guy. Oh yeah, he's the medicine. He's the, like, so when people say that, I go, well, that's the video they watched, right? It takes 5.5 years for me to train my students to where I think they're effective in a health or exercise environment. It is 5.5 intense years, and each year the training gets more comprehensive and more complex.
I got to the point where I basically felt that I could not do within the medical system what I knew I needed to do and ethically and morally was bound to do to support people. When I started the Institute, it was a rough go. I mean, I had a really hard time because Americans, they first of all, because I didn't have a college degree, they didn't think I had anything to teach them. You know, like some of them thought, well, Paul keeps telling us machines are bad, but he's going back to, you know, dumbbells and cable machines. So they actually thought I was antiquated. The good news, the saving grace, was that I had been publishing articles in various journals in Australia and New Zealand, like strength training journals and personal training journals. So what happened is people in those countries were reading my articles and buying my scientific back training and scientific abdominal training, which came out before scientific core conditioning. I produced those videos in '89, if I remember right. So the Australians and the Kiwis were getting a hold of these videos, and it was blowing their mind, and that led to one guy was on the New Zealand speed skating team, but his parents owned a beautician's school. And so they were used to running seminars. So he used his family ties and his connections with the New Zealand Olympic Committee to set up my first seminar tour in New Zealand, which boomed. Because again, they thought they were behind the Americans. So to have this American coming over who had already worked with a lot of professional athletes and sports teams, which I had done through my clinical years, they were very excited about that. But I had just gone through a bankruptcy and was really broke. I mean, I had everything I owned in the back of my car practically, except for my library, which was just a pile of books and boxes. So when I met Penny, I told her, if you're looking for a rich man, you found the wrong guy. But if you're looking for somebody that you can work with to grow something meaningful, like the Institute, then you got the right guy. My relationship with her, she would run the business and I would do what I do best, which is create educational materials and teach. And in all fairness to Penny, she's a great presenter too, and she used to present at conferences that I was presenting at. Actually, I used to be at the same conferences with her, and she'd be presenting on topics, and so would I. So she sort of stepped down from the limelight and took over the business. And so I went from zero, and I think within about 3 years, we were up around 2.5 million gross with Penny at the wheel. So she really is the mother of this institute. This institute would not be here if it wasn't for Penny. There's no way. So the Canadians, the Australians, the New Zealanders, the English people, the Scandinavian people all saw it right out of the gate. They told me over and over again, man, this is the best stuff we've ever seen, this is so good. And I had very elite physical therapists and team doctors and the best people in the countries that I was teaching in were saying, what you're doing is really awesome. But the Americans were just the opposite. And it was only when I was really beginning to have a big inroad over there and publishing articles over there, and the Americans would run into these people, whether they were on sports teams or traveling on vacations, that I started getting all sorts of calls and emails from Americans going, what are you doing teaching all this stuff to foreigners? You're giving away American knowledge. And I said, don't even try that crap with me. It actually took the Americans to get to the point where they realized they were falling way behind the world community to get interested in an American teacher. I mean, many times consulting for sports teams. I'll remember when I was consulting for the Canberra Raiders, and I evaluated their top 10 players that all had bad injuries. I wrote up their programs, and I met with the doctors to show them what the findings were. I trained the physical therapists on what to do when I left, how to maintain it. And I remember their team doctor looking at me and going, how on earth do you know this much? And where did you get all this knowledge? They couldn't even conceive within their own professional circles because it was so unusual for somebody to have a depth of knowledge outside their own field, let alone multiple fields. Well, my resume got so strong it didn't matter what letters were behind my name. So what I found is that the best practitioners of any profession don't give a shit about degrees. They don't care about whether they all just want to do the best they can do for people. And at the end of the day, those were my greatest teachers. The most elite doctors and therapists are truly lovers of humanity. They don't give a shit about these professional barriers. But the rest of them are all caught up in the sort of childish silliness that's inherent in human beings everywhere. This is a global problem. This isn't a local problem. And why should I wait till people are broken and sick and in pain to come learn the things that we should all be learning?
And if you just treat the spot that hurts and you don't balance the wheel, you will always have problems with your bicycle, shall we say. Have a seat.
My system is not based on telling other people what to do. It's based on actually authentically practicing the teachings. And people are inherently lazy and they want to have the accolades of an expert without doing the work. So it's been very, very hard for me to gather people that can go beyond the intellect into authentic mastery. Many people want a certificate on the wall. They want to claim that they've got it because it's cool or it's the in thing. But very few people want to actually master the craft, which is what the whole intention of the Institute is. The challenge then was to cultivate instructors that could be an authentic expression of the teachings and stand as experts in their own shoes without my support. The workload and the demand on my time made it such that if I didn't grow a group of instructors to do that work, it would have stifled the growth of the Institute, and it would have made it too much of an ego institution, meaning all about Paul. I don't want it to be all about me. That's never been my mission at all. It's just I had to do the work to create it and make it work and test it. But now, quite frankly, I would rather just paint and write books, do the things that I need to do to grow me, which is, requires a lot of quiet and isolation from people, which is really hard to do when you run an organization like that. But we're at the point now where pretty soon I'll be able to step back. But it's also given me the opportunity to do the podcast, which is really one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done for the public.
So Chris, welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek.
Thank you, Paul.
Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek. It's so funny to be on the other side of the table with you guys.
Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek.
Thank you so much. It's a real treat to be here, so thank you for having me.
Enjoy, everybody. I sort of felt that I had to demonstrate to the world through athletic accomplishments and strength feats that my techniques really worked, because that's what people wanted evidence of. The problem is that because I became famous for these types of things, doing lifting stunts and things like that, it kept drawing in, muscle heads, so to speak, and, ass kickers, but not people are interested in holistic health or spiritual development. And so, because I was getting so much attention and it was causing so much momentum, I didn't realize I was getting caught in that same mindset. It was too much about power, too much about speed, too much about winning. And so Great Spirit delivered a devastating injury to me, which is, having a guy fall on my head doing a lifting stunt, which damn near broke my neck. I mean, it blew 2 discs out, tore a bunch of spinal ligaments, left me with severely unstable C5-6 vertebra, spinal cord compression, had the whole left side of my body went numb and atrophied. I couldn't even carry a briefcase for 6 weeks without a lot of pain. The transition in the Institute came with my crisis, and I had many people over the years come to me and say, boy, since you've had that injury, you're so much more approachable, and you're so much more feminine and so much more open to other opinions and challenges from people.
Who wants to play on this beautiful day? Who wants to play?
The Institute's mirroring me, and as I've grown up and learned to love more fully and accept people with different opinions and realize that the people that drive me the most are actually my greatest opportunity for spiritual growth, I've attracted students that are mirroring that back to me. So, and this is why I tell people, all the students and instructors, you really have to be the basis of your own teachings. You must practice what you preach. You must practice what you're teaching people clinically, or you're never going to be authentic, and you will always have patients that drive you crazy, not realizing that you're just looking at yourself. My dream has been, since I started the Institute, to pass legislation so that CHEK professionals can be licensed healthcare professionals, and insurance companies will pay for their members to see CHEK professionals, just like you can see a physical therapist, chiropractor, medical doctor, and acupuncturist. So my goal is really to see more and more people enter the field of holistic health taught by the CHEK Institute, to begin creating an established field of holistic health practitioners, as opposed to, because what we do is fully integrated and there's no system like it in the world. And we need holistic awareness and holistic health practitioners all over the world right now, because when you teach people holistically, it makes it obvious what they've been investing their money in and why they need to stop investing their money in it. And when you teach people what it takes to be healthy, ultimately they realize the money that they spend has to be put in the hands of organic farmers and legitimate healers and therapists and doctors. And you will never do this through the political system, because we don't have a political system. We don't have a White House. We have a corporate headquarters that's totally invested in profit and profit alone, and has zero foresight for what they're doing to nature, and won't stop what they're doing till the planet's dead and we're dead too. So I see that the change has to start from the ground level. You can't start at the top with this type of governmental system. You got to start at the ground level, one cell at a time, which is one person at a time. And it's going to take thousands of CHEK trained professionals and others like us that might come from different systems, because now many people have got the bug, and my system's kind of getting copied all over the world, and pieces of it are showing up, which is, from a business perspective, isn't something I'm excited about. From a spiritual perspective, I'm very excited about it, because we're now breaking down the barriers of organized religion, and we're developing a spiritual consciousness. And we're now breaking down the barriers of traditional medicine and developing holistic medicine and energy medicine and psychosocial medicine, or biopsychosocial medicine. And I think because the CHEK system is multidisciplinary, which means we can have medical doctors, nurses, chiropractors, osteopaths, housewives, truck drivers. I think we're the only system in the world that doesn't have all these professional biases set up to create such a heavy filtering system that it allows us to bring people in from every walk of life that are waking up to the need for holistic health. So I see the future is that we are going to be a much more recognized public source of health information and education, and we're also going to be a much stronger source of holistically integrated health professionals that respect, honor, love, and support each other with the one intention of helping people heal, grow, and live their dreams, which includes healing the planet. You know, there's the old thing, 6 degrees of separation. It'll only take you 6 people if you use your brain and get to the right people to get to anybody. So we're only 6 people away from everyone in the world, from the starving people in third world countries to the rich people that are torturing the planet with chemicals for profit. And when we realize there's only 6 degrees of separation, then we all know that we're not that far from each other, and that the influence that we can have by living true to our values and true to the needs of nature, and realizing that the best teacher is the silent teacher and the best lover is the silent lover, meaning when you walk through a shopping mall or you get on a bus or an airplane, everyone's watching. They're watching what you eat, they're watching what your body looks like, they're listening to your conversations. And when you heal, every step of the way you become more harmonious, you become more resonant, you resonate your harmony, you resonate your love. You become a stable, attractive force. And if we're only 6 degrees away from each other, then any one of us has the power to touch every part of this globe. And when we realize that as a community, which is what the CHEK Institute really represents, is a community of people that are genuinely aware of and interested in and practicing holistic health, then if you do the math on it statistically, we, even with 10,000 practitioners right now, we have the ability to transform the world. And I think that my dream and my intention and my inspiration and motivation is to do my best to leave this planet knowing I did everything I could possibly do to make the world a better place. And if my students can live that way, there's no doubt we're going to do it, and we're going to do it together. And that's my dream.